into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Yep, you do it on the computer for sure.
All right, let's go.
Hear ye, hear ye. The arrival of Count Flores is nigh. Pod Damn America podcast approaches. Hear ye, hear ye. Put in some horse sounds there.
Yeah.
I need some background.
Oh.
Storming. Okay, thank you, Anders. This is what I was going to do to start the show. I found this the website to help me with sounding more medieval. Greetings, Alex and apostrophe RS Anders. Thanketh thee for joining me on our weekly Gothic Socialist podcast for the no more brain than stone children. I will desire thou art well. Brew thyself some kratom, inhale a breath of amyl nitrate, fixeth ye a nice big margarita, and settleth in, because the present day we shall learneth about neo-feudalism, the theory popular amongst magicians on YouTube, yond posits yond we art heading backward toward a society resembling a previous mode of production runneth by counts, barons, dukes, kings, lairds, that's an apostrophe in it, earls, and the liketh. I'm using a website I found where you type stuff into it, and then it translates it to Old English. And I'll be using
it's
it.
a website?
Remainder of the show. It's technically Shakespearean, which is its own thing, I guess. But
is it in iambic pentameter?
No. No, it's just like Babelfish or something.
It's like Old English, just translated to that.
The content doth commence.
Yeah.
It's like Middle English. Old English is like German. Have you ever seen Old English?
It's weird.
No.
It's like the warbling gar or whatever. Like words are all backwards and stuff.
Wait, so when did it become Middle English? In the Middle Ages? That makes sense.
I defer. I've walked right into an area of expertise I'm not qualified to talk about.
Well, I know.
I'll see you in the next round.
I know it was only like 150 years ago where they made spelling and grammar standardized in the U.S. So if you read like Lewis and Clark's old writings, it's like they spell words differently throughout it, just depending on the mood they're in, and because there's no like right way to spell stuff.
Spelling is imperialist in a way.
Yeah, that's sort of a tangent, but anyway.
There's a guy, I can't remember his name. I was reading about it a while back. There's like a singular person whose mission it was to standardize the English language, and it's the reason.
God.
He's the reason that it's like the word color has no U in it in America.
Mm.
And
Dat fan.
It's
Dad fan?
Yeah.
That's who we're thinking of. He hated his name, and he had a grudge on the world.
That would be a movie that Dad fan was in. Maybe they tried to like make his big Hollywood debut was going to be him going back in time to make the English language what it is, because we're thrown into chaos.
A surprising theater bomb. The Dat fan goes back in time as himself movie, leveraging all of the comedic weight of his Comedy Central presents.
You know what this just made me think of is what was it? A jester in King Arthur's court. What the fuck was it?
Black Knight.
Yeah, it was sort of like Black Knight, but what is that thing called? King Arthur's Court,
Round Table.
A Yankee in King Arthur's Court.
Okay.
They did a version in the 90s with Whoopi Goldberg, and that was one of my first introductions to. Yeah, and she brings a laptop.
The Black Knight.
Yeah, she brings a laptop back to the Middle Ages and uses it to like predict when an eclipse is coming, and for some reason she gets an internet connection in like 1217,
Not realistic. Big stretch. Audiences will not follow.
But she is much better in that movie than anything she's done since. She was actually a great performer before she sold out. Anyway.
Yeah.
And she did some great songs with Elmo. What? Can you do that last part again?
She lived in she lived in East Germany and was a Marxist. And then somewhere around the line, she became a shitlib.
Yeah,
all right, I'll chill out.
It's fucking weird. So the reason I wanted to talk about this thing today, this concept NEOFEUDALISm, is because you sort of hear it around. It's kind of been echoing around some things I've been listening to and reading, and I was curious what people meant by it because it's a prediction about the future, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the reason it's timely, I guess, is because it's heavily invoked in discussing like tech bullshit, like tech dystopia stuff. And with the passage of Prop 22 in California and the Biden administration's, announcement that we're going to like expand it and, wink, wink, work with labor on it or whatever, people are going off and sort of invoking this idea that what's going on with Uber owning everything and you living in an Amazon Grubhub house and all this stuff. Oh my God, we're somehow reverting back to something resembling feudalism. And it's an interesting idea and it's like fun. I get why people get their heads around it and why it's like a good scary dystopia or whatever. But I read about it a lot this week, and the more I read about it, the more I think it's really kind of silly, and it's libertarian kind of bullshit. We'll get into that a little bit later, but obviously it's the same thing that Hayek was talking about in like The Road to Serfdom, right? That's the big bet. That's the big bad. That's the big scary thing that you use to manipulate people, is the idea that something that we're doing is going to, it's going to put you down this road, and then one day you wake up and like you're a farmer with a page boy haircut and you're tilling the land and you're like, oh damn, I shouldn't have signed that moveon.org petition to to something with Democrats or some shit. I don't know.
You're going to be covered in mud and you'll have to let Jeff Bezos fuck your wife. That's what people are afraid of. But it does play right into, as a dumb guy, I understand why libertarians are so up on this, because the easy connection for feudalism, if you know nothing about it, is feudalism, big castles, that's like the big government. Right. It's like a big government. Oh, no, you don't want that.
Or the big corporation. Now. Yeah, the big monopolies. We just got to bust some monopolies, according to some people.
Well, that's what's weird about this is like with libertarians, that they come at it from this side angle where like the problem is still like regulation, but we'll get into that later. Third reason I wanted to talk about it is because it's very funny, and I wanted to do jokes about the Renaissance Fair and shit like that being in like the tech dystopia, because it's very I don't know, I just enjoy the idea of Uber drivers on horses and things like that. It's a fun idea. That's
fun on the horizon.
Got me going down this little road.
This road to serfdom.
Yeah.
Back on my bullshit. It is as someone who has been to a Renaissance fair, there are less tech people there than you'd hope. More theater kids than tech.
Yeah, I feel like they're probably there, but they're not wearing their tech clothes.
Right, this is what they do on weekends. Yeah.
Anyone wearing a polo is in tech. That's how I work.
Nerds have a really hard time living in the current timeline. I feel like everything's either got to be sci-fi or like medieval specifically. Right. Or if you're really weird, like Civil War.
Or steampunk. transcendent.
Steampunk has no place among the other two. I think that's like an aberration in culture that was like popped in like 2006 and hopefully has popped back out of existence because it doesn't even make a ton of sense.
Yeah, it's just a really aesthetic. It's
like high fantasy is a concept. Sci-fi is a concept. Steampunk is one specific idea where steam is coal, and that's all we have for that.
Yeah. What did that come from? Was it like a specific...
There is, yeah. It was a sci-fi writer, I think, used the term in some book, and then it just launched this huge sort of movement of
it's a movement.
It's a movement, yes. I think it was, H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, they would write stuff that was kind of like that. Let's see where the origin of the term was.
What if a horse were a zeppelin? Could one imagine such things?
So it was a variant of cyberpunk, and K.W. Jeter was the first person to use it in one of his books, and then it just kind of launched this...
In New York, we love Jeter, don't we, folks? We love him. Greatest has ever played the game.
He's so steampunk.
I mean, it is.
With the top hat.
Apparently, there's a steampunk cafe in Cape Town, South Africa. But it is, this thing where like
quirky
people like to wear the clothing. And a lot of the time, the clothing doesn't really have that much to do with steam. It's just kind of like monocles. And
a big part of steampunk is that apartheid is still around. That's a big element of it. That's the defining feature of the town.
But you can kind of like craft a civilization out of it in the world you would rather live in. You know, that's, I think, what the appeal is to a lot of people.
It's like cowboy era shit, too, because a lot of it comes like it sort of gained a popularity around the Wild Wild West. Will Smith.
I was about to say, I hate to pull the Wild Wild West card, but mechanical spiders. Let's talk about them.
Yeah.
Well, you know the producer for that, I forget his name, but I was a big Kevin Smith fan back in the day, and apparently Kevin Smith was in talks to write a Superman movie with the producer. And the producer was like insisting that there be a giant spider in the Superman movie. And Kevin Smith was like, I don't know. In the comics, Superman doesn't really fight that many spiders.
I draw the line at spiders, sir.
Yeah. And then Wild Wild West comes out, and it turns out he was a genius the whole time. He just wanted to see a big ass spider. And that's what it took to make it come
That's what America wanted.
Apparently.
I've started typing Trump tweets into the Shakespeare bot. This is how you say the haters and the losers in Shakespeare. The coxcombers and the losers.
Nice.
There's a term for haters. It's fun.
If only we could we got to send Trump back there. Get this guy out of the White House.
He'd be the king instantly.
Yeah, they would just think he's a god.
He looks like a goddamn stained glass window already.
Yeah, dude, he's
glowing hair.
Habsburg-looking ass, start to finish.
The thing is, back then, being tan was like a peasant thing. So I would be in charge of shit.
I'm learning already.
They thought that's why royalty would take milk baths, so they could be like extra white. So if they saw someone like Trump, they may very well be just freaked out and think he's scum.
Milk is so thick. Why would you do that? Why would you get in a bath of milk? That's probably how a lot of people got sick.
Yeah, probably. It's not good. It's never been good for people.
It's not one time.
No, it's definitely not good to get like your genitals exposed to it, I would imagine.
It's keep your holes away from the milk. But
God.
You know what? Back on track here. Neo-feudalism as a concept.
Well, that's what it means.
Exactly
they want to bring back. They're going to invent new types of milk, oat milk, almond milk, and people are going to bathe in it. That's what they mean by neo-feudalism.
Can I just say what I thought going into it before my learning process, researching for the show? When I think neo-feudalism, I think like the Amazon Federation, and you live in their spaceship and you work for them, or like I'm sorry to bother you, how you live, you're like a slave in a little bunker and you work for them. They turn you into a horse.
But I love the classic film I'm Sorry to Bother You. Quite enjoyable. Yeah, no, we're gonna get to that. Because that's like kind of where I think people look at what's happening, and then there are separate diagnoses of how we got there or where that's going. And I guess kind of the conclusion I came to in reading about this stuff is that the diagnoses comes from people that don't understand like feudalism and capitalism being modes of production that are distinct from each other. And yeah, I don't know, just why those things are not, completely part of the same blob or whatever. There's some interesting arguments. The main thing I think that if anyone wants to read about this and look at that's interesting is this professor named Jody Dean wrote a piece about it. And let me pull it up. It's
PSL enthusiast Jody Dean.
She is, yeah.
Yeah,
Author
she
of
writes
Comrade.
Verso books and shit like that. Comrade, she has a presentation on it where she talks about a lot of the stuff from a Marxist point of view. But I still kind of don't really understand what she's saying. Although, to be fair, this piece is titled "NEOFEUDALISm: The End of Capitalism?" with a question mark. So I don't think it's really beating anyone over the head with like this is going to happen. It's just an idea.
Right. Yeah,
so-
go ahead. I think there may be some at base. We're not returning to feudalism, but there are some like similarities in the form of capital management, capital ownership relations that like look like feudalism.
They're hinterlands.
Yeah.
Yeah. She sort of starts by citing Capital is Dead by Mackenzie Wark, which asks the question, what if we're not in capitalism anymore, but something worse? The question is provocative, sacrilegious, unsettling as it forces anti-capitalists to confront an unacknowledged attachment to capitalism. So this is actually, this is like that thing Amy Therese said the other day, where like racism needs racism or whatever. Really weird kind of way of putting it, right? But like, I guess she's sort of posing the question, what if what we're experiencing right now has developed qualities that are no longer definable as capitalism or are like beginning to resemble something else? And it's an interesting question, I think, because so much of what Marx describes as capitalism is very material and commodity based, and like I'm reading Capital right now, and one thing that came up in like a reading group I'm doing is just this question that I think is pretty like relevant to living in America right now, which is does this all apply to like a service based economy in the same way? Because when your job is to like teach someone tech or something like that, it's not necessarily like a solid thing that then gets retraded. It's like you're teaching knowledge, and then there's all these questions of, is that tradable though when you teach someone else a thing? The service industry itself is kind of, you could argue that this doesn't fit directly into this way of analyzing things. And so does a service-based economy where everyone, where 90% of people are Uber drivers and fucking, app-based delivery people and, Fiverr people and stuff like that.
And then 10% of people get served by them. Yeah. As scholar Tim Allen might say, hey, Carl, how many sweaters goes into a freaking TikTok? Come on. Tim Allen discovering Karl Marx this week has been the highlight of my week.
Yeah.
I don't think so, Tim.
Yeah, well, I think with the service sector now, it's become kind of the commodity in many ways is in the experience of like going into a restaurant, which is still persisting amazingly enough throughout COVID, or buying something at a store, or just that experience. But it's still really a commodity, or it's something that surrounds a commodity. And I think the broad etching of capital and labor relationships, that mode of production that Marx described is still there. It just like is different stuff for the most part. And at the same time, there's a shitload of stuff that is produced in factories, just less of them are in the U.S. now.
Right. I'm
West,
kind
I
of
guess.
leaning the same way where the production hasn't changed. It's just the entire aesthetic of it is completely different now in a way that is misleading. And maybe
Yeah.
is kind of something else.
Well, I mean, also like 90% of what we talk about when we talk about commodification is like food, and food is not something that you resell after you purchase and use it, because that would be disgusting. This is all factored in still into the way the economy works. It's not as though everything is like just based on this idea of marketing and stuff, or the market and trading and stuff like that. It's all factored in. So it's people that read fucking the first chapter or whatever and then fucked off, right? But it's interesting. So she poses this idea of neofeudalism as this like kind of four-pronged thing that you can look at our society and project onto it and sort of go from there, right? So the first thing is parcellated sovereignty. So she's describing like when Rome sort of broke up and fractured all this land off into a Settlers of Catan board where everyone lives on a different hex, and then there's a fucking lord and a count and all of the fun names for different things you can be in the chain of command of the lord system, or the feudal system. And so she's saying that like you can kind of see that now, because one aspect of the feudal system is that like legally the way the law is implemented in this system is entirely up to whoever the lord of your land is.
Right.
So it's like subjective to them whether they want to enforce certain laws. And
it does kind of make you feel like we're living in the shittier version of that right now, where even if the resource disparity is the same, how much better would it be to be a medieval lord than to just be like a trust fund kid? You get to make up rules and everyone has to respect you or you kill them? That kicks ass.
Yeah, well, I think she would kind of maybe be arguing like that it's the same. You are a medieval lord if you're a trust fund kid or whatever. Well, she's sort of starting to like abstractify it onto, the fucking Bezoses and the people that own the apps and the Peter Thiels and stuff like that as being like the Baron or the Earl. I can't remember what order they all go in, but like, or the King, I guess maybe.
If you're Jeff Bezos, you're the king because you're the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
Or yeah,
no one higher than you.
The king's at the top, and then whoever works for him is
Duke.
Yeah.
An aristocrat class, essentially, of like people, nobility. They're separate from the serfs.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if you run like the Uber Eats office, you're a gentleman. Which is landed gentry or whatever. I don't know. So then the next of the big four things she describes is lords and peasants. So yeah, we're kind of just already talked about this a little bit. Now there are new versions of lords and peasants, right? The lords being fucking all these people we just described, and then the peasants being you on your dog walker app or whatever, and sort of looking at, so I guess like two things, right? To go back a little bit to the legal thing, the subjective nature of the laws being implemented. She talks about like how, well, that technically kind of qualifies for these huge apps because they all like, what do you call it? They all like launder their money offshore. So the law doesn't apply to them, but it does apply to the people that work for them. And if the serfdom thing, imagining yourself as a serf, well, the qualities that we're coming back around to that might make you feel like a serf if you are a gig worker are that, serfs by definition don't really own anything and, just exist to like till the land and work and stuff like that. And I don't know though, because this is where it's like starts to break up. Well, the whole thing's kind of broken up for me, but like this is a big piece of it that doesn't really add up to me, which is that part of being a gig worker is that you're actually kind of, well, I mean, you're required to own your car. I guess that does kind of feel like it. Like you own your car, but it's also not really yours because they're just using it, but they make you take care of it and all this stuff.
Right. And if you have debt, it complicates the ownership of something.
And as soon as you get in an accident with that car, it is definitely your car, and they have no relationship
Oh,
to
boy.
it. Yeah.
I've seen a Lyft guy. So I got T-boned in a Lyft once by another Lyft. And our driver was mad as hell. But we got out of the car, and thankfully, like, no one was hurt, but his car was totaled. And we looked at the other guy, and he was just, like, weeping because he realized he was, like, fucked. Even though he hit us, he was, like, done for.
Oh, man. That's so sad.
And it was weird, too, because we had just gotten hit by a car, so we were like, fuck you, but I'm sorry.
Okay, well, let's try to imagine this in, like, feudal terms. So you're riding on the back of an ox, right? And another guy is driving the ox, and then you are T-boned by another ox, and the ox is on fire, and the guy on it is crying.
You totaled my ox.
Does the Baron come in and buy you a new ox?
I think they come in and just like rule on who owes who what, and they don't have to really do anything. They just decide who gets to behead who, or who owes who what amount of doubloons or whatever. And I think that's kind of similar. That is kind of similar today because the company is not employing any of these people, so they don't have to take any responsibility for it. But the court system is going to decide for these people who are paying legal fees who owes who money, who is in debt peonage to who.
So a long time ago, when we talked to Matt Christman on the show for the first time, he said something that I thought was really interesting, which was that with the rise of capitalism in the market, you also saw like this complete outburst of a million lawyers, right? Suddenly, this is a very necessary job to sort of like negotiate between all these transactions that are happening between people and stuff, right? So we still have the lawyers and shit and the court system in like situations like this, but I mean, there's an argument that can be made that the tech companies are kind of reaching back into that world and overtaking the law themselves a little bit. I don't know though.
Right. Well, that's the complicating part of it, because when you go into the sci-fi element of it, of a United Federation of Amazon, it's assumed that you're going to have a company essentially start creating a legal structure like their estate. But a company has no impetus to act like a state. There's no reason why you should even bother doing it. It doesn't help you accumulate profit, and the only reason a company exists is to create profit. So that's like, I don't know, it's two different machines to me. I don't think it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like off. Instead of like turning everything into an Amazon, warehouse and school for your children and like thing to live in and everything, like a weird, like Bezos Fallout sort of, there's a robot with a gun that makes you go to work type of shit. I think it's more like, if you want to put this in dystopian sci-fi terms, it's like one of those weird stories where everyone is just like pushed off to live in like the gutters and stuff, and then that's not really the problem of the company. It's like, this is a side gig or whatever.
Right. If these companies had any way to actually invest control over the population, they would do it. Like, we wouldn't be having these serious issues with climate change if companies had any thought of what was going to happen besides their next quarter profits or whatever.
Yeah, well, I think in feudalism there were boards basically that were set up through bodies of commerce, like different fiefdoms or whatever would decide we're going to appoint these people to settle the disputes, private tribunals, and
they had those big hook masks.
Yeah, those crazy doctor masks, the one that Christy Tebow had come in and check out her warts or whatever. But the relationship to the state is the interesting thing, Chrissy Teigen.
Tim Tebow's wife, Christine Tebow.
I thought you were saying that as a joke.
I don't know what
You
I
have
was saying.
snappy names for everybody. I just thought that was your name for her.
Let's go with that, yeah. But the kings, I think, had an understanding with these lords, and I'm not sure totally what separates a king from a lord. I think the king is just the one that's like been endowed by God or thinks they are.
But the lords involved.
Yeah, but the lords would just say like, okay, yeah, we're under your kingdom. Sure, I can do whatever I want within my little, fiefdom. And the king was like, sure, yeah, you just got to accept me as your designated ruler by God, and you can do whatever you want. So it was like this weird understanding, I think.
You have to believe I came down from a mountain after a cloud gave birth to me. And if you can co-sign that, then I will give you grain every 6 months. No, I'm sorry. Then you will give me grain every 6 months.
Yeah. Yeah. So they had some sort of patronage system there. But then with the disputes, they had these things set up that were purely private. And I think maybe we'll see things like that in the future, but if there's
what's the difference between that and like World Bank or these international organizations?
Well, they're backed by states, and these are just what I guess the similar thing would be in the future would be they're purely private. They're purely boards that are agreed upon by businesses to resolve their own disputes.
Man, I really want to be on a board.
I want to be on a council.
That'd be cool.
An evil council. Moving on a little bit. Factor number 3, Jody Dean identifies as this thing called hinterlandization, right? So another aspect of feudalism is that you are sort of tied to your land, like physically. You can't leave and get another job if you don't like making oats or whatever, right? Because the space where you live is surrounded by barren, unlivable woods, and you don't really have the means to leave, and so there's a natural sort of closing in, right? And you probably look at this and go, well, that's not true if you live in San Francisco or something. But she sort of poses an argument that the hinterlands are now, they're like they're in your mind or whatever, or like they're not like physical, they're they just have to do with you like de facto not being able to work anywhere else, or
That's pretty spooky. I think that's appropriately gothic. The werewolves of the mind keeping you at your dishwashing job.
Yeah, she did have an interesting point about this in the lecture I watched, where she was talking about how there's this sort of trend on the left of envisioning municipalism. So cities sort of having like decentralized, economies and governance systems. And that doesn't always take into account, in her view, the agriculture that's sort of like exterior to the city, but the city depends on. And so we have to think of it even more, like a good Marxist, we have to think of it even more in terms of central planning, which people are perhaps skeptical of after, the late Soviet Union. But I think that is true to an extent, that like if we're just viewing, we have to, address this hinterlandization or whatever she calls it with like a comprehensive view of an entire society, and making sure we're not just like democratizing and egalitarianizing one region without doing the same for another that's agricultural.
This part seemed more abstract to me than the Lords are trust fund kids part. That was much more easy to understand.
Yeah.
This one's kind of all over the place. I mean, I think that she's probably talking about like how people in these like tech cities and stuff are starting like, you can farm in your apartment window or whatever, or there's like a community garden or something like that, and that kind of being a dead end in terms of feeding all of society.
Well, what's the first thing you think of in terms of like if you got a job at Google? The first thing you think of is you get the beanbag chair and the pinball machine in the office. And so if they create this little bubble that you have to live in, you're going to work 24/7, which is the danger of essentially like a company town. is once you don't leave, that means you are fully under their control. You don't really have the ability to leave anymore.
Yeah, and you're not having a sense of community in your life outside of employment. So even if you're not like directly reproducing capital for them, if you're off the clock, you're still hanging out. You're still enjoying their fruits that they've given you, their beanbag chairs and their ping pong tables and all that stuff. And then you never really go home and meet people from your community who work at other places and, decide like, hey, maybe Google shouldn't control all the land around us. Maybe we should, organize and make sure that doesn't happen in a, civic or political way. It sort of has this depoliticizing effect on the people that work for it and who live near it in a way that, I think we saw with company towns in like West Virginia, who had to respond to all the labor militancy, all the subversive organizers who were like challenging their power, and one of the ways they responded to it was by creating welfare capitalism. So they built playgrounds for their employees. They gave them slightly better conditions than they had before, and that was sort of intended to pacify people.
Are you mad at us? We made swings for your Irish.
Yeah, that's part of the mental hinterlandization, right? Your life only exists in like the commons or whatever, and like the commons was also a part of feudalism.
Right.
So
it's actually the good part that we don't have anymore. Let's get that back.
Yeah, well, so we'll get into like the company town thing a little bit after this because you're right that you do kind of have it, but it's like a fucked up version of it if you do work in the evil, Google building or whatever.
Right. It's like there's a pinball machine, but you're going to feel very guilty the whole time you're using it.
Right. Yeah. You're not going to feel like you are done farming tomatoes.
Unless you're the guy who gets fired,
Yeah. Oh yeah. You get to enjoy it like on your last day, I guess.
As the guy who gets fired a lot, I can tell you this is a trap I've run into quite a few times.
Playing the pinball machine.
Where they're like, yeah, there's beer at the office. And they're like, Alex, you've been drinking the beer in the office.
That was actually the idea behind the pinball machine at Creek in the Cave. Was to...
Yeah, the Creek in the Cave was a feudal system for sure. That's why it's called the Creek and the Cave.
You're right. The Creek in Plato's Cave.
You mine ore in the cave, or you work the creek. You work the creek. I don't know how this works. You pay.
It's going to be a separate episode for just New York comedians.
Yeah, fair. Good point.
Right. We explain how each closed comedy venue is an economic system.
Yeah. The Stand. Fascism. I don't know. Well, they're still open. Fourth thing. The fourth element of feudalism, catastrophism. So this is the wildest one in this article, in my opinion. It's like she's talking about how, okay, I'll read a little bit. A loose, mystical, neo-feudal ideology, one that knits together and amplifies apocalyptic insecurities, seeming to take the form of the new embrace of the occult. Okay. Techno-pagan and anti-modern. Examples include Jordan Peterson's mystical Jungianism and Alexander Dugin's mythical geopolitics of Atlantis and Hyperborea. I have no idea what that is.
This is some real grad paper shit to me. This seems like you had to fill an extra 300 words. I don't know.
Dugin, is she... I know some people who are really down on him because I know white supremacists apparently like the Atlantis myth. It's right.
Because fish are white.
It harkens back to this sort of like white mythical ethno state. So maybe that's what she's hinting at. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, Atlantis and Lemuria, the other lost city. There's like weird online.
The media doesn't want you to know about Lemuria. They're hiding. Google Lemuria.
it gets into like flat Earth territory if you read about this shit. But there's like people that think that there was another lost city called Lemuria where like giants lived and shit. And then I guess there's Nazis that are into it.
It makes sense to me in that catastrophization is, your king has power over you because the whole stick they wave at you the whole time is if you didn't have the king, you'd be conquered by barbarians or the neighboring state would come and get you. And modern capitalism does have that, but I also think that kind of like all forms of government have that. So it's not like a lock to me the same way.
Yeah, this is a weird one to me because it sounds to me like an old out-of-touch person is just going, why are the kids doing tarot cards?
There's witches now. And they're doing curses to the moon because they're babies?
I mean, you could go a lot of different directions with this. One is, I don't know, it's just kind of a joke, which is what the whole goth thing is about. Like when I talk about it, it's mostly a bit, it's a little bit of an aesthetic thing that comes from, I fucking argue sometimes like Catholicism and shit like that kind of gives rise to, a generation later, like, just stupid goth shit. Like
Catholicism is the most goth shit of all time. It's all about fear of the devil.
Yeah, it rules.
Well,
I used to have a bit about that, about why. Okay, basically what we just talked about. But like the other stuff she's talking about is like, this Jordan Peterson stuff and like the crystals and the paganism and stuff like that. I definitely think that Connor Habib would disagree with me when I say this, but a theory I've had for some time about this is that like new age shit is kind of a secular religion that's floating around out there right now for a lot of our generation and the one maybe a little bit older than it, and it's very individualistic in terms of explaining your like soul's arc in this universe, like where it's going. It takes it away from being like something that's communal or something that is somewhat organized, and it's like it's doing what religion does to people's brains, but it's sort of like putting a lot of the stuff that you would usually place on, getting from some sort of guru or whatever on like, your individual, like you're not actualizing hard enough or whatever to see God,
Do either of you guys have a crystal aunt?
I have a spooky Santeria grandmother. But that's not new age.
I have a mom.
Old and dark age. You do, Anders?
Well, my mom's into homeopathy and all sorts of things.
I would count that. Is she religious too, or is that just
no? But she was raised Catholic, so I think that definitely feeds into it.
Oh, so we're 100% right then, you're saying. Because my aunt also was very Catholic and now doesn't seem to as into that as much, but also like does think her stones cure cancer. And if you bring it up at Christmas, she will fight you in front of the family. So there's like people have very strong feelings about this stuff.
Right.
It's how you've organized your life.
Right, it's like the wafer and the wine or whatever. Yeah, it replaces that in a way. But I think that though with Jordan Peterson and stuff, what she's kind of saying is that things seem like very bleak to a lot of people, and so these kind of calls to I don't want to say mysticism, but like old sort of myths and mystical legends and things, and the Middle Ages and feudalism. I think appeals to some people because if you listen to Jordan Peterson and I assume this Dugan guy, I'm not too familiar with him, but it looks like he's kind of fast.
This Dugan kid.
It's all about like hierarchy, and that's kind of like the Middle Ages. That was the big thing. Like people are preordained, as we were saying, to rule, and other people are preordained to be their servants, and that's kind of what Jordan Peterson is all about, is like knowing your place in the hierarchy, and you're going to be happy if you find it and just be content to serve another person or dominate another person.
I'm a count. It all makes sense now.
Your account. Well, I don't know if you were about to talk about this soon, but the interesting thing about the neo-feudalism stuff is if you're looking into it, there is, a few lefty articles in the Los Angeles Review of Books you can read dissect it intellectually. But then the first thing I found that popped up was an alt-right YouTube guy from Norway. And I think this actually does have a lot of purchase on the right, because those people can kind of see this ship is going down as much as we can.
Yep.
Right.
And they want to kind of explain what's going on for their own way, but it's stupid because it's all about that's why we have to deregulate oil or whatever.
Right. So there's this guy, Joel Kotkin, that Jody Dean talks about right up top of this article, who is a conservative geographer. And his whole thing is that he envisions the U.S. future as a mass serfdom, a propertyless underclass that survives by servicing the needs of higher earners, yada yada yada, all the things we're talking about. But his solution to it is deregulating the oil industry so as to put fuel back into the heart of American society, the suburbs, where everything runs on cars and shit like that, which is backed by fucking nothing. It doesn't make any sense. People drive more.
Medieval scholars Metallica once said, "Give me fuel, give me fire, give me that which I desire."
Oh, I should put
reload.
I should put Metallica into the Shakespeare bot. I put a Trump tweet.
Yeah, do it.
This is
do Metallica next.
I'll do the Metallica next. It's gonna take me a minute to load it up. This is Trump tweeting in Shakespearean at Fox News, and the fake news networks aren't showing these massive gatherings. Instead, those gents hast their reporters standing in almost exsulficate streets.
Whoa.
Ooh.
Anon hasn't suppression by the presseth. MAGA.
MAGA!
Fun.
That's like his power word. He used that to reach out to his dark lord.
Yeah, it's like Excelsior.
MAGA!
My God.
Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about this libertarian bent a little bit, because
did you guys all watch that video I sent you?
Yeah.
I did, yeah. The Norwegian guy drinking beer in the woods.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I don't think he said anything. I watched. It's 11 minutes long. I watched it. It's mostly like a Norwegian man almost setting his shirt on fire at the first 5 seconds of the video, brushing it out, then sitting in the smoke and being like, "It's gonna be with Joe Biden. Serfdoms. God, oh, the smoke's in my eyes. Normally it's at the camera, but now it's in my eyes."
Right. This is a guy who he makes sort of these survivalist YouTube videos of him in the woods talking about how he's, free from society or whatever. He's his own master. But I am 99% sure that after he finishes filming these things, he goes back to his rent-controlled, subsidized Norwegian apartment and lives in normal fucking life. There's
a whole part of the video about how he's mad other people are wearing masks for COVID.
Right, which is a very Scandinavian thing. Apparently, they're not doing it in Sweden, but he views feudalism as just the government, like we were saying before, and the vaccines and all that stuff is the feudal lords controlling. So in a way, it's a very Middle Ages response to feudalism, which is to escape to the woods and live by yourself.
Yeah, and drink. He drank a beer the entire video. At the end of it, he is like, "It's not alcoholic by the way." Which, what the fuck are you doing? Just drinking O'Doul's in the woods by a campfire, buddy? I mean, I guess he was.
Follow me on Twitch.
Yeah. So, well, okay. I want to talk about the libertarian thing, but I think first I want to get back into the company town thing. So, I was thinking about all this, and I thought it was kind of interesting because what the libertarian or conservative point of view on this doesn't really understand, I think, is that feudalism and capitalism are separate modes of production as we understand them as Marxists, with this distinct thing that happened that pushed it in one direction and probably prevents it from really going back. Capitalism is a cohesive thing that will not magically reform into like King Arthur's court with wizards and shit and people living in serfdom or whatever, right? It has tangible like qualities that sort of hold its shape even if it morphs a little bit, is what we're like talking about. And something that I think the reason that maybe they don't really understand that is because there's this thing with conservatives where they hate tyranny, right? But they don't really seem to be able to differentiate between the tyranny of government and the tyranny of like big capital and like private industries and stuff like that. And a lot of them consider, I don't know, like there's just no distinction. And so what you
a lot
have
of the tyranny is if you criticize their comedy special.
Also, that is
that's something I've noticed.
Well, it's also it's also a lot of very comfortable people, like we were talking about. This fucking
the tyranny is coming from inside the house of the Zoom call.
Yeah,
Right.
It's it's often the most like comfortable people in society, really, who are like, they got to go become Dale Gribble and like go into the garage and start making up like conspiracies to explain why they feel kind of weird because you're still not really actualized if you're someone who has a house and a car and a garage and all that shit. Like you still go to sleep at night, you're like, this still sucks. Why, right?
What's that guy's name who does like a ton of amphetamines and like lives out in the woods and says the N-word and all his specials? Fuck, what's that guy's name?
Could be anybody. It could be literally anybody. Chris Gethard.
Let's go with that.
What, a comedian?
Yeah, fuck. Sorry, I'll figure it out. Never mind.
What is a comedian who does meth and lives in the woods and says the N-word? Owen
Benjamin.
There you go. Yeah. Figured it out this time.
Put in some medieval sounds. Put them in. Castle gate opening.
He wants his own fiefdom. That's what he dreams of. He wants to create it in New York State and just like have serfs and do his and have them like clap and laugh at his offensive comedy.
Keep clapping, or I'll say my slurs.
It's weird because what these people have imagined is that it's government run, and that's what makes it terrifying and horrible, right? Because it's like inescapable if it's government run, and then it's tyranny. I guess I was thinking about this, and I was talking about this to somebody, and I was like, what is this argument that we like revert back into like knights and shit like that? It's like fucking weird, right? And it's kind of odd that someone would pose that argument with surrounding like something like Prop 22, because what's happening with Prop 22 is these tech companies, by reshaping the economy and reassigning the workforce to be one of independent contractors instead of employees or workers or whatever, they're skirting all these labor laws that were won in the last like century or so, and that's where we're reverting back to, right? So then you could kind of make this argument that like the Prop 22 dystopia doesn't put you back into serfdom. It just sort of puts you back into something resembling like the company towns that the miners and shit lived in before like the Battle of Blair Mountain, all the, wobblies and turn of the century fucking Mother Jones people and shit. And that might be maybe a little bit more of an apt thing to overlay on top of these, Amazon communities and stuff like that, and Google offices where you have, like you said, like beer and a movie projector and shit like that. You might be living closer to someone who, lived in a precarious sort of untenable capitalist situation around, 1890 or something like that.
Your life is closer to a miner in West Virginia than it is to a farmer in France in 1535.
Right. And I guess that the reason that is kind of unpalatable of an argument to pose towards a conservative is that identifies the fucking thing that got you out of that situation as those labor wins, right?
Mhm.
And identifies what the companies that are doing is skirting the labor wins to sort of form into like an evil corporate overlord, which in I guess in conservative ideology that's sort of a good thing. Like it's supposed to be good when there are monopolies and stuff like that. It's supposed to like, you know,
Because there's very powerful businessmen, and they've used their free labor to get to the top because they've been the best. So isn't that nice?
Well, but a lot of, libertarians and conservatives claim that monopolies only arise from crony capitalism and from the government intervening and creating monopolies, which we know is not true. But it seems like nominally, anyway, they at least oppose monopoly power and want a decentralized economy. But I think this guy Lanier, who she's talking about, doesn't he support UBI? Something?
I don't know. She talks about that in the article.
She says that she doesn't support it, right? Because it would be kind of like your little pittance to live off of.
Right.
Yeah, she says it sucks and is lame.
Yeah, well, it all depends on how it's distributed, right? If it's done in this way where you're deregulating everything and Yang style, that would suck. But I don't know. I'm sort of tempted to support it if we nationalized an industry and just gave everybody I can't do that? Fine.
Anders? You supporting UBI again?
I don't know. I'm sort of ambivalent about it. I think it depends on how it's done, right?
What about full communism, Anders?
Well, that I'm for. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about full communism a little bit. So I was reading about company towns and the Battle of Blair Mountain a little bit. Battle of Blair Mountain's awesome. There's a really great Rev Left Radio episode on it. It's really long. If you don't know about it, it's really cool. It's the largest labor uprising in American history and the largest armed conflict since the Civil War. Takes place in West Virginia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's these fucking union guys fighting against the goddamn feds and shit. It's cool, right?
Long story, TLDR.
But it happened right after this, situation where people are living in these fucking untenable company towns, which is, something throughout history that you see as like the what do you call it? The fucking pretense for, conflict. It's crazy that you could capitalist system can have its workers living in the sorry to bother you house, and then eventually people are like, all right, fuck this, right?
Right. Because that's the problem with the sorry to bother you house, right? Is the company has to set up a house so that you live and work there, but then there's no incentive for them to make it a good house.
Right.
It just sucks ass and you have to live there.
Because there's no incentive, right? Well, so I started reading about something else because there are still a few company towns around. There are a lot of them in other parts of the world still, but in America, like I remember last year when I was driving up California, Sarah June was telling me about a couple of towns outside of these tech cities that are like basically company towns, or like places that are like vestiges of what used to be company towns, and like the farming out there. I can't really remember exactly what. There was one town where they farmed one fucking thing and everybody worked for the company and everyone got sick and all this shit. I don't know. There's stuff like this all over the place, but there's one that's still kind of around, but it's not really what it was in what it was aiming to be or whatever. And that's Celebration, Florida, which is a planned community. But where it came from is really interesting. Is Walt Disney, right before he died, became fixated on the idea of creating like futuristic. When I say futuristic, I mean like the art movement futurism, utopian like worker town for everyone who worked at Disney World, Florida, to live in. And like it would be a situation where like no one owned their property, right? And you would just be an employee who lives in an apartment, and then you work at Florida at the Disney World. And there was like, let me see if I can find it.
You get to be at Disney World, so that's the trade-off. Doesn't
you get
that
to
sound
be goofy?
good?
That's for sure.
It's super like fucking Banksy shit. And for anyone that doesn't know this, it was called, the original project was called EPCOT, and now that which is now Epcot Center. EPCOT stands for Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. So it was...
Oh, my God. I'm having a Metal Gear Solid moment right now.
What he envisioned it for was this crazy, like, 1950s vision of a utopian futuristic town where, like, the company runs fucking church, postal service. There's a monorail that goes everywhere. There was something called, let's see, tomorrow. Okay, here we go. The seeds for the Epcot concept first appeared at Tomorrowland in Disney. After all, Epcot would feature monorails and people movers in the plans. In addition, Tomorrowland featured the Monsanto House of the Future. There's just crazy shit like that. He hired all these crazy architects. Everything was just, the Raytheon Children's Hospital or whatever. And he just died right after they basically used a bunch of shell companies to buy up all this land surrounding Disneyland. And legally, there's still a sliver of it that's like not owned by the company, so it's somehow legal or whatever. But they gave up, and as they gave up, the Epcot Center, the reason it's a dome is because he was like obsessed with domes.
He's obsessed with getting dome.
Yeah.
Get that Dome City.
You can see through his work.
Right. That's why Goofy was so goofy.
What do you think Mickey's job was as Sorcerer's Apprentice? It was giving dome.
Yeah. All the brooms are very phallic for that reason. He's sort of fluffing them into... Okay. So there was his original plan was for the entire city to be inside of like a giant like Astrodome type situation. You got the idea from this architect that had the same idea to take over the 1965 I can't remember the exact year, 60-something World's Fair. There was some guy that was trying to turn like the Chicago World's Fair or some shit into a city for a while. That he gave up to. Walt Disney made a video about this. He was like 2 months from death. He had lung cancer, and he was just making Disney videos, like pitching these to the government and shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. And eventually, they gave up on the project, right? And it turns into Celebration Florida, which is more of just it's a fucking planned community. It's just a gated community sort of situation. It's pretty funny. It's 88% white, even though they tried to incentivize people of color to move to Celebration and work in the gift shop and stuff. Why wouldn't that work,
Don't you want to be with your T.O., Mickey Mouse?
Yeah, they refused to subsidize the housing, so it went to people who could afford that, who disproportionately white, and then a lot of the housing still sucks, right? It's dilapidated in a lot of places, and
yeah,
right. It's a classic white guy mistake right there.
Mm-hmm.
Buying up all the houses in the Disney suburbs and finding out they're actually really shitty, but you try to act like it's a good deal.
I do remember 15 years ago, longer than that maybe, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers wanted to make their training camp in Celebration, Florida, and the residents were like, who plays for this team again? What generally background, what do they look like? And
it's called football, but you catch it with your hands. I'm not sure if that's what we're about.
But they just there was a scare, a scare campaign in the town of all these black men will be running through the streets of Celebration.
They'll be touching down.
Doing their little touchdown dances, celebrating in Celebration.
You let your teenage daughter out of the house, and all of a sudden there's a turnover on downs.
Very nice phraseology there. Someone's football literate.
Thank you for saying so. It's almost the big game, Turkey Day.
That's right.
That's right.
I like the idea of a Florida swamp guy trying to resell a bunch of old Disney crap that isn't valuable anymore. Like, this animatronic Goofy right here, let me tell you. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, what you got here? This is a Buzz Lightyear. You can put this just on anywhere, to infinity and beyond.
I'm not gonna lie to you. This is very valuable, like that type of shit.
Yeah.
This is not part of the house. This is a gator. Stay away from the gator.
Anyway, so also a very interesting wormhole to go around reading about like EPCOT and Celebration and stuff like that. But I guess what was interesting to me about it specifically was that everything's owned by the company. Almost nothing is run by any like even the government outside of it, except for like, the government still sort of has a handle on some property taxes and stuff like that. And it's, supposed to be this utopia, right? But it didn't really take form, and instead it turned into just like a gated community suburb. And it's something that you might look at and go, this is this feudalism thing that you're talking about, right? This is the company owning everything and everyone works for it. But since it's not owned by the government and it's owned by a private organization, you don't really have these sovereign citizen guys that are like, fucking angry at Disney or whatever. It's just sort of like, I don't know. I'll just move somewhere else or whatever.
And I believe unless you own property there, you can't vote. Which is,
can you legally do that?
I guess so, because it's some like,
aren't there amendments about that and stuff?
voting, it's like technically a community development district, which it's like some weird Florida law loophole, which is like alternative to it's just like, I don't know, it's technically not a town, or it's unincorporated, so it's incorporated by a company so they can do what they want.
Right. This is right next to Purge Town, Florida, where all crime is legal.
So it's one of those like situations like with like felons where like everyone's bodies are counted, just grafted onto like one guy in a Disney Mickey Mouse hat, and he owns everything, and then he votes with like 1,000,000 times the power of one voter. He just swings an entire district or something.
Yeah.
Because that is that's a law in Florida. Like that, if you're in prison, your body's counted, but it's just given to people outside.
Right.
So
yeah.
like,
wait, in what way? Like they
like
can
for the
vote
census. Like for the census, like they'll build a jail in a conservative like area, and the people in jail will count for the census, but they won't be allowed to vote. So they'll get more representation in Congress.
yeah, they use it to swing districts and shit. And there's like a theory that if felons could vote it, they would have swung the 2000 election, which I know you like talking about, Anders. The 2000 election.
There's another 4 hours of content.
Yeah, but I wonder. I'm gonna have a look into that. That's really fucked up that you can't vote if you live in like Goofy land or whatever.
Also, because that's been a big issue recently for like mascots or the people who work at Disney World and Land who have terrible working conditions. I think like a few years ago, Bernie tweeted about it, and he was like, the low wages and poor working conditions is not what Goofy and Mickey Mouse are supposed to be all about.
Right. And he was right.
But maybe they live in I don't know if they live in Celebration, but that would make sense for them to want to disenfranchise those people.
The issues of the mascot community are the issues of the Disney class.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess in conclusion, I don't really know where I'm kind of headed with all this. It's just kind of a sprawling bunch of information I had in front of me, and I think that like I generally think neo-feudalism is a silly idea that's mostly imagined by weirdo like sovereign citizen YouTube guys and isn't going to happen. What is actually going to happen is probably not even the company town thing necessarily, because it's almost more insidious in that everything that you lack when you live in the company town, you also lack when you live freely in New York and work a shitty job. You don't really have to. You don't live in a house with all the other, the delivery guys or whatever. All the other caviar drivers or whatever, but you still lack all the things that you normally lack. So you don't even really have communication. I don't know. I guess my take on this is a third thing is what's going to happen, because you don't really have. I mean, unless you have these Peter Thiels and Bezos and shit going the route of EPCOT at some point, which it could happen. I could see Elon Musk trying to start his own fucking town or something.
Mm-hmm. I would think that if they weren't so determined to leave the planet. Because Elon Musk will have that on Mars.
Right.
Yeah. For his Mars One program or whatever that's called. He's going to have to make... They had an article come out a few weeks ago that like the laws of America are not the laws on the Elon Musk Mars colony. Because like, what the fuck are you going to do about it? You
I remember.
Make a phone call? It's a different planet, bitch. I was
gonna say, speaking of laws, another thing I forgot to mention about the Disney town is that they kind of have Disney cops. It's pretty weird. They're not really allowed to have guns, but they do a lot of other shit. Very eerie.
It'll be interesting.
They have keyblades.
Yeah, they're all Sora. There's two other guys behind him that are just throwing shit.
You gotta hope your party isn't busted up by Riku, because that's gonna be a bloodbath.
Maybe they'll go to Antarctica, because the laws there are sort of sketchy. I don't think they really have them. There's like some treaties that say some things for the explorers to go there, but
honestly, Antarctica would make more sense for companies to settle in than Mars. I don't think anyone has thought the Mars idea through all the way.
Right.
It's going to be real tough.
Wait, is Mars cold or hot?
It's very cold.
Very cold.
It's a planet farther away than Earth. But the thing is, when you think about, like, and this could be a whole other episode, and it's going to be a huge tangent, but if you were going to terraform Mars, because that's what sci-fi likes to do, is you make Mars like Earth. Whoa! And even if you could hypothetically do that, and it took 1,000 years, Mars's magnetic core is gone. The planet is dead. There's no moving rock under Mars. So you can't, like, set up half the shit you have on Earth. Right. It's not going to work. They don't have an atmosphere. So,
well, it'll be interesting to see.
I mean, what are you going to do with that?
Now that Antarctica is like melting, maybe it's easier for humans to settle there, and that's what they're going to do. It's possible. Although, like, how are you going to? It doesn't make a lot of sense to set up a business there. But if you got to just go and create your personal kingdom someplace, it seems like a good one as any.
Oh, this is always my fucking soapbox, but the whole thing about the fun Space Kings theory is it might take a while to kick in, and in terms of how long the Earth will be livable, I'm not sure we have the time.
Yeah.
Too bad. No Dune.
They would be like right about to do it, and then kind of everything goes down.
Oh no, we live on Venus now, and the sky is fire, so it didn't pan out.
Yeah. The other thing, I guess, that makes me think like this isn't entirely like a foreseeable future is that you kind of already have something resembling company towns that's just sort of reformed that don't have the logo everywhere, which is like these planned community type things that are just like malls that people live in that have been cropping up since the 90s or so. Like there's one in Austin called the Domain that's in like a rich neighborhood that a lot of different tech companies have their employees, I don't know if you have to live in it, but it's just like it's all there, and it's super convenient, and if you want to, you can live this weird life that's in an outdoor mall that's also an apartment, and it's all sort of like homogenously dissipated. It's not like Globo Corp or whatever.
Right. Like Kendrick Lamar once said, you can live at the mall, but on a scaled down level, I mean, if an entire town works at the Walmart, how is that different from what we're talking about either? So maybe a lot of this has already happened.
No.
Yeah.
I do think there's a lot of discussion now as we've been talking about the concept of neo-feudalism, because it seems like we're going somewhere new, but it resembles what we had before capitalism. We're regressing in a way. And I totally get the desire to like put a name on it, right? And there are a lot of similarities, but that system is still capitalism. We should just call it capitalism, and we're experiencing the crisis of capital, and it's potentially collapsing. I hope it does, but it's more likely to just keep dragging on and destroying more and more lives. And I think the reason it might feel like, we've gone past some tipping point, we're entering a new epoch, is because for our parents' generation, they experienced like this blip that was just the total exception to what capitalism usually produces, which is, strong labor protections, a welfare state, like a much more egalitarian economy than we know now, and then we had also seen before it. So that was like really the blip on the radar. That was this big giant exception to the rule of capitalism. Now we're just going back to normal.
Social democracy seems nice. We'll never know. I don't know. Sounds cool.
That's something Luisa said to me a long time ago. I thought it was really interesting, which is that if you're a millennial, you probably have more in common with like your great grandparents than your parents, because they also were living in a particularly precarious situation, especially if you're like immigrants. If your great grandparent was like the first generation immigrant or something like that, them, living in a city and not knowing how they were going to get by and all this stuff. This is, could be arguably kind of similar to your dumb life where you live in the city near the town where you grew up or whatever, and you're not sure what the fucking job you're going to get next is and all this stuff. And like that has way more of a collective history than this thing that is just in our direct rear view mirror that everyone argues was supposed to be permanent and for some reason went away.
Right.
The suburbs and the fucking, 70s and all that shit.
It was permanent for 60 years and is no longer permanent.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess to kind of put a cap on it, this thing where we're asking, what is this new thing, this new novel situation where you're a worker with no power and you're completely alienated from all the other things in the chain of production that you're in, and you are just listless and alone in a city, and you're zipping around getting jobs done, and you'll never own property. What is that, right? Why? That's not feudalism.
To quote Karl Marx, that's capital.
Right. That's fucking capital, Tim, right? I don't think so, Tim. So, yeah, I mean, the alienation of it is what makes it capitalism, right? It would be feudalism if it was like all hexed off into little cells that you can't escape or whatever. But the very freedom of it, where you can move anywhere you want except for like up, is... That's the fucking thing, right?
Right. That's the very limited freedom we have is to choose which person exploits our labor.
Exactly. Yeah. No, yeah. Uber will never own you because you can go be owned by Lyft or whatever. Which is what the libertarian argument is like. That's how you fight, right? Working for a different person. Fucking stupid. I will close out now by reading a passage from the robot that I've been talking to the entire time. This episode, so closeth, nay matter how far, couldn't beast much more from the heart. Forever trusting who is't we art, and nothing else matters.
Beautiful, beautiful poetry.
Thank you. I wrote that. This is actually kind of awesome in Old English. Never hath opened myself this way. It's ours, we liveth to our way. All these words I just not saith, and nothing else matters.
And nothing else matters.
All right.
And then that's enough lyrics from Nothing Else Matters.
All right, that's enough. I'll link the Shakespeare bot in the episode if anyone wants to play with it. I think I'm going to put more I think I'm going to try putting Marianne Williamson into it and see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to be doing this for some time now. Send us your ideas for the Shakespeare bot.
All right. Well, that's all I got. You guys got anything you want to plug or?
I could do a plug. Should I do a plug?
Sure.
Plug it up, baby.
Well, all this talk about company towns in space reminds me of the pilot I made about a company town in space that you can watch on Vimeo, and I will put in the link of this description. It's called Space Trash. James Austin Johnson is in it. He plays a cop who is very religious with his wife he is sexually attracted to. Yeah, check that out. And if you're a big fancy media man, come and save me from the life I live. Otherwise, Ballin' Out Super, Theater of Delights, Pod Damn America. These are my shows. I'll see you around the building.
At Anders Lee here on Twitter, Dursley1 on Instagram. Check out my other job, Redacted Tonight, YouTube, portable.tv. And lately, people have been talking about raising money for, I know a lot of our audience is going to have no interest in this, but the 2 Georgia Senate seats, people are saying, oh, donate to the Lincoln Project, donate to the campaigns themselves. And if you actually want to help, the best way to do that, and this is just for really building working class power in Georgia in general, there are a number of groups that are labor affiliated that are actually doing the groundwork on this stuff and more that you should check out. And they're on Jane McAlevy's website. Go there and check out Help Georgia Senate Fight. And there's groups like New Georgia Project Action Fund, Movement Voter Project, people who are doing great work that's going to last longer than just this next, 2 months. They're actually building lasting institutions in Georgia that are going to help working people. So check that out.
All right. My other show is Why You Mad? And if you enjoy our show, we have merch on our Big Cartel site. I think I'm going to put some new stuff up there soon. We're going to have like a new logo and shit. Listen to our bonus episodes on patreon.com/PodDamnAmerica. We put out lots of bonus stuff, and we love you very much, and we need you to buy our show.
We just want what's best for you.
Yes, we do.
And rate, review, subscribe, all that shit. Yeah, I think that's it.
You're so handsome.
I'm doing a show on Monday if you're in Brooklyn. Look at my Twitter. Outside, not inside.
It's
inside,
safe.
The people shouldn't do that. Okay. I think
It's finished.
It's finished. Ye doth finished. It's doth finished.
Here,
Finished.